I have been living in Glen Avon for about 20 or 25 years. I was the only one in my family to immigrate here. I was born in 1940 and I came around 1956 or 58. Originally, I am from several states there: Durango, Zacatecas, and Torreon. My family is from nearby Zacatecas and Aguascalientes. I came with a truck driver in a trailer with a huge tank. He transported the trailer passing through Juarez. We would enter for a day or a day and a half and then head back to Mexico. When I came, we crossed the border as if it were nothing. There wasn't the care that exists today, no surveillance, and there wasn't as much hatred as there is today, so much racism. But I came with just the clothes on my back, my clothes, and a little money. Antonio de la Cruz.
I have lived in the city of Jurupa Valley, California for 4 years. I lived in Orange County, and I came here 25 years ago as a 98 immigrant and the daughter of immigrant parents who brought me to this country for a chance of a better life. The most difficult part of immigrating to this country was leaving our home, which was the home where I grew up, with all my childhood friends. I feel that was the hardest part when coming to this country. When we migrated, all the family came with us, bringing practically nothing with us. I remember a little silver box that I still have, from 25 years ago that a friend of mine gave me as a souvenir. We crossed the border with almost nothing, but I brought that gift. I can proudly say that I'm an immigrant because although you suffer, you also appreciate it when you are here in this country. Rosa Ramirez Sanchez. My father came here with nothing, just the clothes on his back. He left behind his mother, his friends, probably his girlfriend, and he left behind his siblings, all 13 of them. Because my dad was one of the youngest siblings, he wasn't scared to go. The necessities his family had at the time pushed him more, and he became the first one to immigrate with his father. Obviously, his dad was already over here, but he decided to come to California. After he arrived, he became the one that would always help anybody who would want to come to the U.S., even if it was coming in illegally. He would do that, just to help. He would pay for anyone to come and cross into the United States, and he would house them and make sure they were safe. We always had people over at our house, and extra rooms to house people. He always helped whoever he could. My dad's dreams in coming here was simply just to be better. I don't think he really even had a roadmap. Before he came here, it was just always promised that it wouldn't be better. But when he started living out here, he started seeing the possibility, versus if he went back home. He started seeing the reality and how he could also look back and pull someone else, and then continue to pull. So eventually, his siblings started coming to the U.S., and then his nieces and nephews started coming to the U.S., all because of him. Delia Sepien. I was born in Hungary. We left home with one suitcase. I was just 4 years old. My dad hardly talked about it, but we all believe he was involved in the Hungarian Revolution of 1956. That's why we had to leave the country. In addition, he had for a second time refused to join the Communist Party. My sister has told me that we were helped by a group of gypsies and rode most of the way to the Austrian border in their trucks. But the walk across the border to safety was through waist-deep snow. My dad and his friend took turns carrying me on their necks. I had nearly frozen to death by the time we reached safety. We stayed in Austria for a few months, then in Munich, Germany for a couple of weeks. I think that was how long it took to get all the paperwork settled and get everything in order. We finally ended up settling in Erie, Pennsylvania. I met my first husband there. We had 3 children, and we ended up moving to Riverside, California in 1983. He had been born in California and had always wanted to return because he had family there. I, on the other hand, had left my family far away in Erie. After having left nearly everything behind, I was starting again, with nothing. Gabriela Baumert. I immigrated to the United States 23 years ago, first to Pomona and then to Jurupa Valley, California, where I live today. In my native country, I lived in the city of Mexicali in Baja California, Mexico, which is where my parents still reside. What has been most difficult for me here was separating from my family when I immigrated. Although I now have my own family, I haven't made new friendships here in America. Fortunately, my daughters have grown up to become my best friends. I miss my family very much, and sometimes when I am lost in my thoughts, I relive my family memories through looking at the many photographs that I have from my childhood. This is what makes me feel close to them. This is one of the ways in which beautiful memories return to my mind. Patty Toole. I live in Jurupa Valley. I have lived here for 13 years. In 2010, we came to Los Angeles to look for a house to rent because it was very expensive to live in Las Vegas, and Los Angeles was where my husband's brother lived. My husband was the first in our family to immigrate. I followed after a year and a half. I had a difficult childhood. I reached only the 8th grade in school, and in 6th grade I had to share the flute with my sister because we could not afford to buy 2 flutes. We had to leave school due to lack of money. The hardest part was leaving my family. His parents are still in Mexico. We only brought clothes for my baby and me. Everything else, I left everything. I live for my children. I want them to see that it's possible to keep going and not give up. Delia Castillo. I live in Jurupa Valley. I've lived here for about 5 years, and before that I lived in Roland Heights. We went from the Hunan province to New York to Jurupa Valley. My dad decided to immigrate here because he got a great job and thought me and my sister would have a better education. My husband speaks English, and my daughter speaks English and Mandarin all the time. She speaks English in school, and whenever we leave the house, she speaks English, but I teach her Chinese. I teach her the characters. I just speak a little bit of English. Nicole Zen. I have lived in Jurupa Valley for 3 years now. My family came originally from Mexico, from the state of Guerrero, and they migrated to Los Angeles probably like 45 years ago looking for a better life. My parents still didn't know each other. They met here in the United States, and then they had my siblings. We lived in the LA area. My parents still live there. They settled in the LA area because at that time they were little towns. People came over, they brought more people, and they became a community. We knew the people that lived in our town. We spoke the same language. They were familiar faces. It wasn't people that we didn't know. I speak English and Spanish. My first language was Spanish. My parents both speak Spanish. My grandparents only spoke Spanish, and now I speak Spanish with my kids because they are learning it to communicate with their grandparents. The difference between where I live now is that we precisely moved to this area because we did not want to raise the kids in LA. The language difference definitely makes it more difficult for all immigrants when we come to this country. However, in Somerton, most of the residents speak Spanish because it's close to the border. My parents and grandparents spoke only Spanish. My grandfather on my dad's side came to this country without documentation when he was just 13 years old. He eventually got his documents, but not until he was 51 years old. Elia Camarena. In Mexico, we only speak Spanish, so one of the main differences I've found since moving here is that there is some racism towards Latinos. A little bit, not a lot, if you don't speak the language. And in Mexico, where I am from, there is no such thing. The similarities I find in the area where I am is that there are a lot of Hispanics, so their beliefs and cultures are similar to ours because they are Latinos too, so they go hand in hand. Lucero Esparza. I was intimidated when people would blow up at me because of how I pronounced English. I don't speak it 100%, but I tried to defend myself because it drove me. I was driven by bullying. Now I know that in those years I was bullied for not knowing the language because I only spoke Spanish. Rosa Ramirez Sanchez. My family and I are 100% Greek. My whole family's Greek. I brought my brother here 4 years after I moved here, and he has 3 daughters and 4 grandchildren and owns Greek restaurants here. There and everywhere. It's just him and I here. I can speak 5 languages, as you had to know many in the course I did, but if you don't use them, you forget. To this day, I still speak Greek and English fluently. Rita Fine. My family's native language is Spanish, and so I learned to speak both Spanish and English. My father always pushed that. We only spoke Spanish at home, and we would only speak English outside of the house. And same thing for his grandkids. He made sure that they all spoke Spanish. My child does, and all of my nieces and my nephews speak Spanish. In fact, I still speak Spanish on a daily basis. I live with my mom, and so with her and even with my son, I try to speak just Spanish. Delia Zepien. My biggest challenge was that English was my second language. I didn't know any English when I started school, but I learned to speak it in school and from friends. Unfortunately, there were no bilingual teachers to help me, and my parents were unable to help with my schoolwork because they spoke only Hungarian. People sometimes associate not knowing the native language with being stupid. By 2nd grade, I was convinced that that was my problem. I knew I was in the slow reading group, and kids teased me. Thanks to a nasty accident, my life took an unexpected turn. One day I had pulled a chair over by the stove to see what my mom was cooking while she was in the other room tending to my baby brother. The chair wobbled, and as I fell, I grabbed for the pot and splashed myself with hot cooking oil. I spent the next month in the hospital requiring skin grafts. The burns became infected, and I had to spend 2 days a week in outpatient care for the next year. But because I had missed so much school, my second and third grade teachers spent a lot of time teaching me language and math. Gabriella Baumert. My husband speaks English, and my daughter speaks English and Mandarin all the time. She speaks English in school, and whenever we leave the house, she speaks English. But I'm teaching her to read Chinese. I teach her the characters. I just speak a little bit of English. Nicole Zeng.
My dad says the most difficult part of immigrating was the language barrier. His family left Mexico when he was starting his second or third grade. When they went to Long Beach, my dad was in elementary school, and of course, classes were taught in English. So he was kind of confused because in Mexico, he spoke Spanish everywhere, at home, at school. And then when they came to America, it was all English. He told me that his father and my grandmother spoke a little bit of English, but it was just to get by. So he said when he went back to Mexico after 2 years living in the United States, it was a really hard transition because he had got accustomed to English. Just when he got used to it, he had to go back to speaking Spanish, and it wasn't an easy transition like, oh, I'm just gonna speak, read, and write in this language. It's hard. You're looking for a better life, but it isn't easy. Jonathan Rodriguez.
We didn't really have hopes or dreams about immigrating to the US. We were forced to immigrate. We didn't share the dreams of my compatriots, who, for example, imagined moving to the United States to work, save money, and come back home to build a house in Mexico. We didn't have those dreams, but once we were here, we started working and imagining how we could build a better life. Once we were here, we had new opportunities. We studied and worked, but more than anything, we dedicated ourselves to work. My family worked in the fields as immigrants in Arizona. 40 years ago, there was an abundance of citrus orchards, lemon, grapefruit, and orange. Watermelon and cantaloupe were also harvested in the summer months, along with lettuce and dates in the winter. The Mexican and American living experiences are quite different. In Mexico, there's the spirit of what we call pachangueros. It's more friendly and outgoing. Here, it's very different. Elia Camarena.
When I came to study and progress economically, but that dream was never realized. This country is tough. The reality was different. It makes you change your character, become aggressive to survive. Now, I am old and I have no more motivations. I am 84 years old. I've worked enough. I just retired from work. I worked for many years due to poverty. Antonio de la Cruz.
We have a home. We have accomplished it, but there was a lot of adversity to get to that point. We were people who didn't know the language and faced people who didn't like Latinos or Hispanics, so there was discrimination. There were times when we didn't want to continue to be here and felt we should give up on our goals. However, schools and church helped us go forward, which is where I've always volunteered. They took us in, gave us information and support, and helped us with the things we needed at the time. Lucero Esparza. The dreams of an immigrant are many. First, I can say that they were my parents' dreams. When you're a kid, you don't look at the same dreams. You leave your friends, you leave your home, you leave a community that you've grown up with on a day-to-day basis. I gave up all that for my parents to bring me when I came to this country. It was very difficult to achieve those goals because you arrive in a country where you don't speak the language. The language is very different, but at the same time, it is also a country where you have to make an effort. Back then, at 16 years old, I didn't look at it that way. Rosa Ramirez Sanchez. I left home because in Greece, once you graduate from high school, marriage arrangements start to get rid of you right away. It's something I didn't want to do. So that's why I ended up leaving the country on my own, on a ship. Of course, it's much better here, and I have a better life. I was poor when I was born. I went through quite a bit. My husband and I did. When we got married, we had like $120 to our name, and he was in the military too. It wasn't just me. He was an American man, though. We went through a really rough time for the first 2 years of us moving here. But God blessed my mother-in-law who held us in her home. She was like a mother to me. When I first got here, I didn't speak a word of English, not a single word. My husband knew a little bit of German, and that's how we communicated. And so she'd sit there and help me. Rita Fine. I took on odd jobs, but my first husband was not ambitious, so we never had an abundance of money. To avoid the added expense of paying rent, we became apartment managers. I ended up teaching apartment management classes as an additional job. As soon as my youngest daughter started preschool, I went back to school myself. I graduated with honors from Riverside Community College, then transferred to UC Riverside for a psychobiology bachelor's degree. I also earned my teaching credential and a master's degree in classroom guidance. Gabriella Bomber.
I think the model was knowing that coming to America is great, but coming to America with a degree gives you some sort of structure to work, so it's not that hard. My father didn't know that a degree is useful anywhere, be it Germany or the University of South Dakota, as long as it is an accredited university or school degree. He graduated from the University of Guadalajara with a master's in business, but didn't use it at first. I couldn't believe he spent his first 4 years not knowing that he could use it. He told me, well, I didn't know. And now he's second in charge of our oil corporation. He's the second lead. Jonathan Rodriguez.
The Mexican and American living experiences are quite different. In Mexico, there's a spirit of what we call pachangueros. It's more friendly and outgoing. Here, it's very different. Elia Camarena.
There is a lot of work here, unlike Mexico, especially back then. I couldn't find work there. Well, first of all, I was underage. They don't allow minors to work there. Also, I came here without papers and worked informally in companies. They paid me for tasks that I did. One difference I noticed right away is that the food is better here than there. There, I only ate beans and nothing else. Here, we drink milk, eat eggs, meat, and vegetables. I lived in a small village, a ranch. We didn't have access to all of that. My family didn't live in the city because it was too expensive. Antonio de la Cruz.
I was born here, but my husband, he's one out of 12 children, and he only has one brother here. There's only 2 of them. When I met him, he hadn't gone to Mexico since he got here when he was 14 years old. He was still a minor, and then he started working. He didn't attend high school. He started working directly. He served a roof firm. I met him, and then we had my daughter, and I decided to fix his paperwork. He went back to Mexico after 15 years of not going to reunite with his parents and siblings. It was different because he doesn't know them. We spent a month over there in Mexico, and I felt like he didn't belong in a way because they didn't know him. He didn't grow up with them, and there's like 10 siblings over there. When I see his relationship with his siblings compared to my siblings, it's way different. For a while, I lived in Mexico. Not for long, but enough to see the differences between 2 countries. The main thing I saw was that there's a lot more liberty in Mexico. Here in the States, people are rushing and running all of the time. The go just never stops. But in Mexico, life is more catered to family and leisure. Because I have seen both sides, I honestly would love to live out there, but I can't see myself doing it yet due to the crime rates. In terms of our family roots, one thing I have always known about my grandfather is that he loved reading. He loved to investigate, to find things out through books and history, and eventually he found that our family name comes from Spain. I love and identify with Mexican music the most. If I turn on the radio, I'm going to turn it on to Spanish music. Delia Zepian. When I go to Mexicali to visit my parents and many family members, I dream of bringing my parents to live close by in the United States. But currently, because of their health situation, it has not been possible for them. However, I am comforted by the fact that although they live across the border, it takes less than 3 hours for me to go to travel and see them, and spend the weekends there. I particularly love going to stay with my parents when my daughter's on vacation, because my daughters are learning about my roots and extended family history, and they love it. They love the authentic Mexican food, and they love spending time with their grandparents. It gives me great pleasure to spend time with them too. Even though we don't get together that often, my parents always receive us with so much affection that my daughters have become used to it. These trips have also given my daughters some understanding of what I was fortunate to have during my own childhood, and of the real nature of family closeness that their grandparents shared with me. Patty Toole.
My dreams for my relatives and for my family members were always for us never to struggle or to deal with the reality over there in Mexico. I guess I didn't know this until I lived there for a few months. Yes, preschool is free, but through 4th and all the way to high school, you have to pay for school. I didn't realize that the education here is free for most kids. In other countries, you have to pay for it at a certain point, not just college. So that threw me off because you don't think about studying, you think about going straight to learning a trade or business. Jonathan Rodriguez.
I left relatives, and unfortunately, there are times when you look back and they tell you that the children of so-and-so did not have the same possibilities, and that they are in bad situations, or that there's not much work here, or there's not enough to eat and everything. So I feel very proud that my parents have brought me to this country. I am 41 years old now. I raised my family here, and it's so good to see your children get so many opportunities in this country, but you also have to take advantage of the opportunities it gives you. I am very happy about the achievements we have made as a family. So in reflection, you can see the connections between your family history and that of the immigrants of today. Rosa Ramirez Sanchez. During my childhood, Christmas and Easter were the most celebrated holidays in my home. We also celebrated Semana Santa, which is a week long of mourning, as my mother used to say, commemorating the death of Jesus. For Christmas, my mother always used to make tamales. I think that in most states of Mexico, tamales are one of the biggest Christmas traditions. At New Year's, my mother made menudo and buñuelos, the type of food that she made and enjoyed most often during these holidays. It was only when I arrived here in California that I learned about the celebration of the Day of the Dead. It's now a holiday that I celebrate in my household. In fact, I'd like to tell you about a celebration that we started here in this area. I can say that we were the first ones. Yours truly and another coworker started Dia de Muertos in the Jurupa Valley Library, and we also started Dia del Niño here. Those were the first traditional celebrations we did in this community. We hoped that Dia de Muertos would expand, because in the city of Riverside, the celebration of Dia de Muertos is big, and our dream was that one day our celebration would be as large. That's why we thought of coming to this area, because there are many Latino people. 2 years ago, there weren't many traditional celebrations to be found in the community, and our idea was to hold those celebrations so that people could begin to get involved and learn about Mexican folklore and traditions. We even brought in an art exhibition featuring works by Mexican painters and invited the Mexican consulate to attend. Elia Camarena. Some of the traditions we still do here are the Day of the Dead, Halloween, birthdays, and Christmas. When we celebrate the holidays, our special dishes are tamales, mole, champurrado, and pozole, which are all really good. We also keep photo albums of our family because it is very important that there's the evolution of our family and how they have merged into one now. Lucero Esparza. I want my children to see that they are connected both in my country and in this country, and that on September 16th, which is the celebration of Mexico, they also celebrate it here. I love that my children carry out all those traditions, the going out, the watching, the doing, the why do you come, the beautiful customs. Always remember them. It's a part of you and it's a part of me. I would also like to reflect that we are all the same, no matter where you come from and no matter what color you are. Rosa Ramirez Sanchez. Christmas was a special time to bring the whole family together in Greece. We put pigs on the ground and barbecue them along with the lamb in the pit. The food part was wonderful because we would celebrate, we would dance, and having family together was great. Even though my stepmother wasn't a nice person, we still had a good time on that part. I still love making Greek dishes. I make spanakopita, which is pita bread with filling and cook a lot of lamb. We're still a pretty big family. We love Easter because we go to the church for midnight mass and we get together and have a meal. Everybody, the family, even my neighbors a lot of the time. That's the celebration we remember. Even on Thanksgiving, my house is full of people. My family and my friends. They're all there. Rita Fine. My parents always made a point to celebrate our birthdays and Christmas time. They made these events feel so special, so important. We would blend the two cultures, American and Mexican, and prepare foods that reflected that. We'd cook up a ham and the turkey, but incorporated our favorite Mexican foods like the pozole, the tamales, the mole, and all of those foods. In fact, we still always make both. My family continues to keep a few of those certain traditions and values that my parents instilled in us. We were very family-oriented back then, and we continue to stay close even as adults. Now, all 9 siblings still gathered together. We keep the tradition of gathering, for example on Mother's Day, bringing all of our kids together. I just want to continue to have that family unity. Delia Zepien.
The most important holidays to me growing up were Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. We were all about family and Christmas, and New Year's was renewing the year and moving forward to make yourself better and work on yourself. Christmas was just acknowledging that Jesus Christ was born, not particularly on that day, but acknowledging that the star was lit for the three wise men. For the holidays, we would eat tamales and enchiladas. Tamales were my favorites. Jonathan Rodriguez.
Growing up, the most important holiday was Spring Festival and the Chinese New Year. We celebrate many Chinese traditions, but the most important is the Lunar New Year. And also, if you go to the Autumn Festival in China, they'll wear very special clothing, and there's also the special mooncake. You'll also learn the background and traditions of the festival. Nicole Zhang. Coming from LA, I feel it's more peaceful. I even feel there's not a lot of stuff to do. But I left all my family in LA, so I don't have any close ones here, and my husband works a lot. I'm just here with my 2 kids, and it was an adjustment because we moved here during COVID, but I still needed to find people from my community. Good thing I found the library. I found people in my daughter's school, and there are nice people, very nice neighbors. It is a very nice environment for my kids. My daughter feeds the animals. She feeds her chickens. She feeds her goats. There aren't a lot of kids nowadays that can say they were born in that environment, and I feel that people that are surrounded by animals or care for animals are better people in a sense, or more caring. I'm not an animal person, but just seeing them is nice, and I think it was worth it. It's still an adjustment, but I think it was a good move. It was definitely a good move. I want to take the opportunity that I was given to educate the community, to excel as a person and as a human being. I have a job that gives me the opportunity to do what I love to serve my community. I'm now certified as a promoter and a health worker, and that's quite an accomplishment. This dream has happened little by little, and for me, it's a great achievement. Elia Camarena. There are 2 styles of communities. You can say that I have arrived and that I have felt at home, although at home I feel welcome and I feel comfortable. The first one was the city of Buenos Aires, which helped me adapt for many years here, and with them I started to grow. I learned to grow there. When I first moved to Jurupa Valley, I felt isolated because I had left everything down in another city. However, no one has closed the door on me. On the contrary, they have opened many places for me. Rosa Ramirez Sanchez. I'm involved at the gym, and I volunteer at the Riverside Community Hospital. I go over there and hold the babies because I'm retired now. And so that's what inspired me, just being around people. I love to be around people. And if I can give something, I do it. You know, like we'll get there together here, or I make a dish and I'm just a happy person. Whatever bothers me, I don't show it. Rita Fine. I learned to volunteer by accident or unintentionally. When I started taking my oldest daughter to her preschool classes, the teachers asked me to volunteer. And that's when I started to enjoy volunteering. I didn't have much prior experience of volunteering. I had done some back in Mexico, but once I started doing it for the preschool 25 years ago, I think I have hardly missed a day since then. I started volunteering in the schools, which I did for many years. Currently, I am part of the Lions Club, and I also belong to the organization Visión y Compromiso. I really enjoy this volunteer work, to the point where I treat it as if it is my profession, or as if it were my job. I dedicate myself to performing it well even if I am not paid. I love it. It is ironic that I'm so well entrenched into the community here in Jurupa Valley, because at the beginning it was difficult to adapt to life here in the United States. I missed my family so much at first, although after a while I became more accustomed to it. Patty Toole. Delia enjoys doing community service at her daughter's middle school. I earned the 2020 Volunteer Recognition Award. I have 4 children, 2 in college and 2 in high school. I make every effort to teach my children the importance of education. I regularly do community service, helping with literacy programs for families, especially computer literacy. I also help with fundraising for events, often the preparing of food. I helped create a program with the teacher based on a book called Graciela's Dream at the high school, giving them resources for education along with counselors and other school staff. I currently help with Reach Out, a leadership program, Leaders in Action, and CCAEJ, Ambassadors for the Environment. I strongly believe that education is important, and I know that not all families have equal access to the resources they need to give their children good educational opportunities. Delia Castillo.
The local community in Jurupa was so small back then, it was very hard to talk to people. They weren't isolated, but they were just very reclusive and very inwards. So it was very hard to have a conversation until we ran into a few people, and they even showed us a library. Because we didn't know this library was here at one point, and we lived literally like 4 blocks from it. You just never know what's around you, and sometimes you just need help to find it. Jonathan Rodriguez.